Hello there, I'm Alex, and I sell cheese for a living. As a cheesemonger and certified cheese professional, I've helped thousands of customers find their favorite cheese. Today, we are going to talk about food pairings and the science behind them. What makes two foods just work together, and what makes some foods impossible to eat and still have a good time. Our last few episodes went over what cheese is, how to buy it, and how to eat it. Now we're going to talk about how to plan more pairings or to explore with more interesting pairing options. If you were at the cheese shop and the cheesemonger had an appetizer bite for you that had 3 to 4 ingredients and they all worked well together, there's a reason for that. And whether or not you know it, when you ate them and they tasted good, there's a lot of science behind that. And you got the 3 to 4 ingredients at the shop, you took it home, you recreated the bite, and it was just perfect. And now we're going to go over how to recreate perfect bites, perfect pairings when you don't have a model to go off of, when you don't have an appetizer cookbook, or if you have a nice website that was offering cool ideas for what to pair together. This is just you and your brain and a grocery store or a cheese shop. What do you pair together? What can you kind of meld together in your mind a bite that will be perfect for you? But first, if we're going to understand food pairings, we have to start with something simple. Flavor isn't just taste. In fact, taste is only about 20% of the experience. The rest is chemistry and aroma. Molecules flying up and around through your retronasal passage, and they tell your brain a story. About 80%, give or take, of the flavor experience is aroma. Cheese has hundreds of volatile aromatic compounds. So do fruits, wines, jams, nuts, chocolates, pickles, jelly beans. Everything we pair with cheese will have aromatic compounds. And when two foods share similar or complementary aromatic compounds, they feel harmonious. When they contrast in interesting ways, they can create a balance. Some examples of shared aromatic families would be like esters, fruity notes, think apples, pears, and some younger cheeses. Pyrazines are going to be more your roasted aromas, your nutty notes. Think of like an aged Gouda or some dark chocolate, maybe some toasted nuts. Lactones, those are going to be your creamy, kind of coconut-like aromas. Think of like a triple cream or some really nice white wines. And then sulfur compounds. These are going to give you the pungency, almost savory. Umami could be a word you could throw in here. Think like stewed onions or certain beers and maybe like a cheddar. After the aromatic compounds, we could talk a little bit about the fat and acid dynamic. Fat coats your palate when you eat it, and then an acid lifts and cuts through the fat. And here's some examples. A triple cream cheese really loves acidic pairings, like fruit preserves or sparkling wine. And then like a high fat aged cheese is going to like something a little brighter or sweeter, and then that's going to slice through the fat. Fat molecules calm down aggressive flavors, and then the acid opens them up again. This back and forth creates a really interesting effect where the more fat you eat, the more acid you eat. It's like a back and forth tennis match, and it's just a great time. If we're talking about tannins in wine or tea bind with fat and protein. This is why if you're drinking a big Cabernet and you eat some aged cheddar, the cheddar can soften the Cabernet. But if you are eating a fresh chevre with the same wine, it may taste like you just licked a chalkboard dipped in tannin. The two different cheeses bring out a different result from drinking that wine. If we were to talk on the salt and sweet amplification, salt boosts your perception of sweetness. This is a neurological effect, and that's why blue cheese and honey work well together, the salty and the sweet there. Parmesan and balsamic, and feta and watermelon. You have the salty, you get the sweet. It is going to feel more balanced rather than overwhelming. Like if you were to do like a salt on a salt on a salt, or a sweet on a sweet, that can be a little overpowering. But the little bit of salt and the little bit of sweet work very well together. It's a classic pairing. And then we can talk a little bit about texture science. Humans love textural contrast. It lights up more sensory pathways in your brain. like a creamy and a crunchy, dense and a crispy, like a melted and a fresh. This variation gives your brain a few more data points and a lot more pleasure when you are eating it. Think like a cookie crushed up into your ice cream. It's going to be a little crunchy, it's going to be a little creamy. If you're doing like a chips and queso, that is going to be your crunchy, your crispy, and then your creamy, smooth, velvety dip. Here are some things that humans have evolved to seek out when they're eating their food. Think of it like an evolutionary flavor rewiring of your brain. You might seek out fat in a food because that will give you energy. You might seek out sugar because that's a quick burst of calories. You would probably seek out something with salt because it is an electrolyte maintenance machine. And you could really grow to appreciate acid in your foods because it is a signal for freshness. And when you're able to recreate 2 or more of those in a single bite, even subtly, your brain will go, good, perfect, yes, this is the food I've been looking for. This is the good food I've been hunting for. Please continue, give me more of this. And these are kind of the baseline terms for what we're going to use for the rest of today. It's going to be the molecular and then the sensory architecture behind why pairings work. There's a lot of information I just threw out at you, but I'm going to try to do my best to find ways to make it all make sense so that by the end of the episode, you know a little bit more about why your brain enjoys which pairings it does and why it hates the ones it hates. It's all about learning why you like the food you like and then being able to express it in a way that will further your cheese education. And not even just cheese. This covers almost all things food. Now that we've talked about the building blocks, the aromatic compounds, some fat acid contrast, tannic behavior, salt and sweet synergy, and texture, let's revisit some classic pairings, and then I'll do a little bit to explain why they work so reliably. But first, let's go over a few options for pairings that you may want to explore at home, looking at ingredients to purchase. These are very common phrases, and they kind of cover every possible outcome of food, but they're true. They do stand up, and they do make sense. Like with like items. If you have a salty cheese and then you put it on a salty cracker, that is probably going to taste good. It's salty with salty. It blends well together. Another one is opposites attract. Think you're sweet and salty. Then again, they are the opposite end of the spectrum, but when they come together, it creates something very nice. One of my favorites that I go back to all the time is blue cheese and like a peanut butter cup. And these are both very rich, savory foods, but digging into it, there's a better reason behind why blue cheese and peanut butter work so well together, and it's not just because it's sweet and salty or it's savory and salty, and that is because blue cheese and peanuts actually share a common aroma compound called methyl hexanoate, and by sharing that aroma compound, it creates a surprising and underlying common area that helps bridge the gap between those two opposite flavors. Now, this one specifically has a shared aroma compound. I think if we dug a little deeper into some others, we would find some other similarities. But something like that, where your brain is picking up aromas from both, it may not be super obvious to you that they share a compound like that, but as you're eating it and smelling it, it's all meshing together and it's just working perfectly together. It's one of my favorites. Another, instead of opposites attract, would be probably the most popular and the most said, is what grows together goes together. This is if you're having an Italian cheese and an Italian prosciutto or some kind of meat that is cured there, you eat them together, it should work well together. What the animals that make the cheese are breathing and eating, and then that goes into their milk, that goes into the cheese. The same would go for the animals that are used in like prosciutto or salami making, what the animal is eating and breathing and drinking. If it's all within the same region, it's going to be very familiar and the foods should blend well together. And I would say for the most part, this works. This is very true. If you can find a very local honey producer and you can find the cows that also grazed on the fields where the bees made the honey from, and then a cheesemaker made cheese from that milk, those two would probably pair very well together, and you should definitely find that and try it. But it is not a perfect one-to-one all the time pairing guide, because let's say you find a region of Spain that creates the best prosciutto, and then down the road from where they make the prosciutto is a factory that makes jelly beans. I don't know if you want to wrap your prosciutto around a jelly bean. It's possible. I haven't tried it. I might be missing out on some great pairing right there. But just because it grows or is produced in the same area doesn't 100% guarantee it'll work. And maybe a jelly bean was a horrible example, but you kind of get what I'm getting at. Okay, here are some of the top pairings and then a little bit of the background of why it works or should work scientifically. Brie and fig jam. Brie contains lactones, think creamy and buttery aromatics. Figs contain esters and natural sugars. The fat in the brie really needs an acid and a brightness, and the fig jam will deliver both. It also gives you textural contrast. It is a soft cheese with a sticky and sweet fruit. So it gives you a little bit of opposites, and it gives you a little bit of textural contrast as well. Aged Gouda and dark chocolate. Both of those will contain pyrazines, which is that like roasted nutty family of aromas. And a nice aged Gouda is going to probably have some tyrosine crystals in it. That would add a crunch that will echo the snap of the chocolate. It's not a one-to-one, but the crunchy, chewy chocolate and then the kind of creamier cheese, but then you throw out these little crystals, that's a nice contrast with texture as well. And then the salt in the Gouda would boost the chocolate's natural sweetness. Blue cheese has strong methyl ketones, which is kind of that blue funk smell. And honey adds a sweetness that can smooth those edges. The blue cheese is a little strong for you. Throw a little bit of honey on there. It should mellow it out quite a bit. The salt and the sweet amplification makes everything rounder and fuller. It's a larger bite. It is taking the best of two worlds, combining them together, and elevating each individual item. Cheddar and apples, this is a hit for me all day. Cheddar's sharpness partially comes from sulfur compounds, and apples can contribute the esters, which is the fresh fruity notes, plus the fat in the cheddar meeting the acid in the fruit. It's a perfect chemistry, which actually the sharpness saying it comes from sulfur compounds isn't completely true. It does have those, but most of the sharpness is due to proteolysis, which is the breakdown of proteins, not specifically the sulfur. But as you're smelling it, you may pick up on some of those volatiles. Manchego and quince or membrillo paste. This is a what grows together goes together kind of pairing. Manchego has real nutty, kind of buttery lactones, and it has some subtle lanolin notes from its milk, the sheep's milk. A quince paste is very rich in floral esters, and when you combine the salt, the sweet, the fat, the acid, you get a very big amount of satisfaction from the sensory overload when you combine those two delicious, delicious foods. Parmesan and balsamic vinegar. Parmesan is going to be umami rich with some glutamates. The balsamic has a sweetness and an acidity. Think like deep caramelized aromatics. The vinegar should cut the fat where the sweetness softens the salt. So again, pairing together, the vinegar is going to cut through the richness of the Parmesan, and the sweetness can make the saltiness of the cheese a little muted, but in a good way. Now, every popular pairing works because it should trigger multiple parts of the flavor system. You're going to cover aromatics, taste receptors, and different texture pathways. Now, we have the luxury of having, a world of science to help us back our chemistry breakdown of what modern pairings can look like and why they should work together. But ancient people, they didn't have that. They just trial and errored almost everything to find what worked best for them. And we can still do that. We can go to our fridge and grocery store, cheese shop, wherever, and we can buy a couple dozen items and piece and pair them together and see what we like, see what we don't like. Or we can trust the science behind it. There's really no wrong way to get to a good pairing as long as you are trying new things and as long as you are trying to figure out what makes food work for you. At the end of the day, that's what's most important. How do you expand your palate while also trying a bunch of great food? Now, let's travel kind of around the world and look at some classic pairings that have stood the test of time and why they make sense. So these are the foods that our ancestors would have found out that worked very well, and why have they been passed down generation to generation, and why they're still delicious today. From Italy, we can think of like a pecorino and some fresh fava beans. These two foods would have been abundant for anyone, really, and when you eat them together, they're delicious, and the reason is because the pecorino's salt and the sheepy tang meeting the green, slightly bitter vegetal notes of the fava beans is amazing. The salt softens the bitterness, the fat carries the flavor forward, and both of them share grassy aromatics, which links them together. In France, we have Comté and Vinoise. Both share nutty oxidative aromatics like stololon. That's the molecule behind maple, curry, and oxidative wines. The fat in the Comté softens the wine's sharp acidity, and the aromatics resonate. They do not compete with each other. They work very well together. Switzerland, here's an excellent one. Raclette and potatoes. Potatoes are going to have mild, earthy notes that complement the raclette's savory, slightly funky profile. And then the starch in the potatoes acts as a neutral base. When then you add the melted fat, it will soften the starch for an unmatched texture. This is an amazing pairing. If you've never had raclette over young potatoes, figure out your closest raclette, go get some potatoes, make this at home. Make it for your friends, just eat it. It is so good. Mexico, we have queso fresco and watermelon. It's light, salty, high-protein cheese meets sweet, high water content fruit. The salt enhances the sweetness, and then the watermelon's refreshing crispness resets the palate. You eat the watermelon after you eat the cheese, it gets your mouth ready for the next bite of cheese. It's just a never-ending cycle. Britain, we have Stilton and Port. Stilton's blue mold aromatics meet Port's rich sugars and oxidative notes. The salt-sweet amplification brings forth balance, and the alcohol cuts through the fat. It's a little bit of a stronger flavored blue and a sweeter type of wine. It is fortified wine, but together it's just delicious. I feel like I've said that about almost all of these pairings, but they're all true. They're all so good. You should try all of these yourself. In Japan, we can do like a mild cheese and a miso or a yuzu. The miso is going to add some umami glutamates, and that will deepen the mild dairy flavors. Yuzu is going to add bright citric acid that will sharpen the soft cheese. And the balance of fat, acid, and umami is deeply satisfying. Across the globe, people have discovered through intuition and repetition the same chemical truths that we are talking about today. They just didn't have the words to describe it. They just knew the food tasted great. We're going to keep this one a little short and sweet today, so let's recap what we've already talked about. The core science behind why pairings work. Flavor is mostly aroma. Foods pair well when they share or complement aromatic compounds. Fat and acid create balance. The acid cuts through the fat, and fat softens aggressive flavors. Salt amplifies sweetness. This is why so many fruit and cheese pairings just shine. And then tannins bind with fat, meaning big wine needs big cheese. Texture contrasts engage more senses. Crunch and cream is peak pleasure. And human evolution shaped what we enjoy. We are wired to love the combo of fat, sugar, salt, and acidity. These principles explain almost every classic pairing, from modern favorites to ancient traditions and the experimental concoctions people still dream up today. Now you have some beginner tools to help you understand pairings on a molecular, sensory, and even a historical level. Next time you're putting together a board, trust your instincts, trust the science, and don't be afraid to get a little curious. Whether you're pairing brie with jam or Gouda with chocolate, or discovering a tradition from across the world, remember, flavor is a universe and you are the explorer. Thank you for listening. My name is Alex. This has been The Modern Monger.